Any committee or organization reports for this evening? Mrs. Shaw.
On February 25th, the Garden State Coalition of Schools met here in East Brunswick. We were fortunate, at least I believe we were, to have Barry Ehrlichson from the Department of Education. She is an Assistant Commissioner of Data, Research, Evaluation, and Reporting, and is also considered their Chief Performance Officer. So you gotta love somebody who's got that kind of a title. Anyway, Barry Ehrlichson is actually the person at the DOE who probably had the most impact on how Park was developed for New Jersey and how it is being implemented. She spent the first part of her discussion with us talking about the need to get feedback from schools. She also talked a great deal about the consortium help desk, mentioning that it can handle 25,000 calls in a day. New Jersey is currently providing 800 to 900 of those. However, after we had that meeting, I did read in the Star Ledger that the helpline actually was down for several hours during the busiest test days. However, they did indicate that email was still available to answer questions, and so really we were not left out there without the possibility of getting answers to questions. Next, the coalition discussed with Dr. Ehrlichson whether Park results should be posted on transcripts. Of course, certainly a decision has not been made on that. We've heard from colleges that they would like to have the info and that perhaps they should be part of a child's education record. They wonder also whether kids will graduate from high school even if their Park scores do not indicate readiness for college and career. Based on the standards that are in place now, kids certainly will be able to graduate from high school without that. They will be required for, the test taking will be required for graduation. I believe it's in 2019. Currently, the diploma policy in the state of New Jersey is based on minimum competencies, and that is not necessarily the equivalent of college and career readiness. So this is all part of a kind of academic discussion at this point, if you will, but certainly Park continues to pose questions to educators and school districts across New Jersey, and this was an effort for the Coalition for Member School Districts to be able to talk directly to the Chief Performance Officer. And we found it very helpful, and she's been very good over the years during the whole development of Park and TJ&J in coming to the Garden State Coalition of Schools meetings and meeting with us face-to-face. So very helpful.
Did she say anything about what happens if a number of schools don't have 95% of their student body taking the test?
She did not.
Right, they haven't made a decision.
Okay.
But she certainly did indicate that they were looking for feedback on not only the testing situation, but also the opt-out students as well.
Right.
Mrs. Shaw, if I could, just because I wanted to make it public, you know, the state came and they provided a number of mandates and requirements for all districts to administer the park, and it was the district's responsibility to get ready to do that. And so I commend this Board of Education for providing the resources, but I also commend all of our instructional professionals and support people who are working every day to make sure Park goes off without a hitch. There's been a tremendous human investment in making sure that gets done. And as I walk around schools, I know other administrators as well, as we go in and check on buildings, we're walking by classrooms, we're getting thumbs up from teachers that everything's going okay. And the students are, for the most part, just going through the process and demonstrating. We're not seeing the anxiety that people perceived there was going to be.
You know, one of the other things I wanted to mention is that I think we even heard at our last board meeting from several parents who are not particularly happy with Park, and they mentioned on several occasions that they trust their teachers to know their students. And we certainly do trust that our teachers in East Brunswick know and understand the kids, and therefore are probably in the best position to evaluate them. But having, been part of this Garden State Coalition group for a number of years now, I can tell you that throughout this planning process, which has been several years in the making, that teachers have been asked for their opinions, that every single question on the park exam has probably been taken a look at by at least 30 certified teachers, and that may not be right here in New Jersey because we are talking about a consortium here, but in any event, it isn't, at least in my opinion, a situation where educators have been left out of the equation altogether. So, like I say, having seen this kind of coming together during the last several years and meeting with some of the DOE folks, and also, of course, listening to, what our families have to say about the park exam, I think that, we have kind of handled it in a pretty well-balanced way, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, and I have to give credit to Dr. Ogden too, because there's a very complex schedule that goes on about making sure a park goes off and number of students that get tested, and that we are within the window that's available to us. And our snow days didn't offer us any pleasurable alternatives, but it all got worked out, and we're still going to pull it off. So I just wanted to commend everyone for the behind-the-scenes work that the general public doesn't get to see.
Just in terms of making it sound like, that's the only thing that's going on. I mean, basically, on a given day, for a given grade of elementary, we're talking about an hour to an hour and a half. Of assessment. It's not like nothing's going on for them.
Yeah, so it's not, 6.5 hours each day spent in front of that computer.
In most cases, it's shorter than the state exams have been in the past.
Right.
I was also interested to see some information about the costs of park in comparison to NJ Ask and the HESPA exam. I mean, certainly there have been some significant costs to introducing the park exam, especially in terms of technology and so forth, but that the costs to administer NJ Ask and HESPA, it wasn't for free. The state had costs that we had to bear.
The state had costs, but a lot of it came from the federal government under a grant to the consortium of states for the development of it. And there were always costs, and whether it's NJ Ask or any of the other tests. There's been no cost to the district.
I think that.
In terms of the technology, but I would hope, getting the additional technology hopefully really is supporting our educational program.
But the board had made a commitment at the beginning of the year to invest in technology. And
Right.
the technology that we invested in was meant for more than just doing the park
Absolutely.
assessment. These Chromebooks are not going to be put in a closet for a year until park again. It's going to be used all year. And we made a commitment at the beginning of the year,
Right.
telling the community that the investment in technology was a focus of the board for this coming year.
Right.
So we've stuck to that commitment.
Yeah.
It was not just for park.
Right.
We hadn't added any technology to the schools in the last really 8 years.
But I can tell you, without a doubt, the Chromebook technology that this board approved and we deployed to the classrooms and to different centers throughout our schools, it's in full use all the time. And it's used for instruction every single day. And as soon as those devices arrived at the doorsteps and were assembled, long before park was administered, teachers had those in the hands of students, not only preparing them for the assessment, but engaging them in real active 21st century instruction and learning. And they continue to do that. And they clamor for more, and we're hoping in the next
And
budget
these
cycle we
kids
can do
are
that.
sophisticated. It did not
Yeah.
take long for them to learn how to
No.
move a protractor in the
No.
Chromebook.
No.
They They
Or for
knew
the
that.
teachers to know what to do with them.
Okay. Are there any, are you done? Thank you. Didn't want to interrupt you. That was
But it's a good-
lively.
Dr. Cohn, Mrs. Shaw, I was curious with regard to the Garden State Coalition of Schools, which is a consortium of similar school districts socioeconomically to East Brunswick, i.e. Hillsborough, South Orange, Maplewood, Summit, et cetera, et cetera. And this was a meeting that was dated in February, so it's pre-park happening. What was the dialogue like with regard to the half dozen or so superintendents who tend to show up at the Garden State Coalition and Mrs. Ehrlichson, since, again, she is the voice of Trenton, so she is not going to back down or say anything that could be even seen as negative with regard to Park. You should recall, Dr. Cohen, and I think Mrs. Gulick was in the audience, last year we heard Mrs. Ehrlichson give her speech about Park. And since it was sort of relatively new to everyone who was there, I'm not going to say people weren't paying attention, but she made it sound as if it's no big deal. So now we're at a February meeting, and it is a big deal. So I'm just curious what the atmosphere was like, what the dialogue was like between her and the superintendent.
As you can probably imagine, it was a very cordial meeting because it was at the end of February, just prior to the administration of the park exams. Most everyone felt that they were ready and prepared. Most of the school districts there indicated that there was no kind of very significant opt-out within their districts. That doesn't mean there weren't any. I mean, if you're asking me if any of the superintendents said, hey, I hope these park tests go down, no, they did not. So, I mean, I think it was a good informational meeting in terms of the kinds of feedback that the DOE is looking for. And certainly that members of the Garden State seem to be willing to provide her. I think that school districts have her email address. I think they have her phone number. And I think that she certainly is trying to make it a beneficial exchange between the school districts and the DOE at this point.
And how about the reaction by the superintendents with regard to Park on college transcripts? Since this is the first time that I'm
There
hearing
was a lot
Ehrlichson
of-
talk about it.
Yeah, there was
and,
a lot of different.
I'll fight that one
thoughts.
tooth and nail.
There was a lot of different thoughts about it. But apparently, and I have to say that I don't know where this particular information is coming from, but that the colleges would really like to start to see some of that. Dr. Ogden, can you shed some
Yeah,
light on
because
that?
there was a follow-up memo. There
Yeah,
is
'cause
the.
Dr. Ogden was at the meeting
There's
as
the
well.
reality, and the communication today from Senator Kane. 47% of high school graduates in the state that apply to college and are going to college have to take remedial courses
Right.
before they take a regular college course, at tremendous expense. So one of the pieces in the whole development of Park was to really make sure that, that isn't a surprise for students when they graduate and go on to college. We have a good record of students being prepared, but do we have students? Yes, that have to take remedial courses. That's our friend the acuplacer that
Mhm.
you've heard me
Yeah.
talk about for a long time. It's still there. It's practically every college in the country. So there's a real gap between whether kids are really prepared for college when they go, and whether they're going to be required to take remedial courses and what have you.
Well, and hence
And
I was
part of
mentioning the
is
discussion is
notion
that
there's a lot of
diplomas are
the
minimum.
colleges involved in saying, okay, well, if you're going to have a state, having the graduation test that we've had in the past, the colleges ignore it. They're not the slightest bit interested. It's either the AccuPlacer or the SAT, and you have to have, to get into community college, you have to have a 535 on the SAT in order not to take the AccuPlacer. If you take the AccuPlacer, you almost always have to take remedial courses. So this is, part of this is a bridge. So a lot of the involvement in development of bridge was to get agreement from the colleges that this would serve as an entrance to college, so that we didn't give kids college degrees and then say, oh, but you're really not prepared. And the College Board has the same, kind of figures in terms of.
And yet, Barry
I'm sorry,
Erlickson,
and
did
there was a
mention
question.
that the DOE certainly doesn't want to be in the position of being the College Board.
No.
That's not their role at all. So, you really need to, kind of gauge how this could be implemented.
And that there is a difference between getting a diploma,
Right.
but you
Which
should
is
know
the
if you
minimum
get the
competency,
diploma,
which isn't the same thing as
Thing
being ready
is-
for college or
and that
career.
same exam, that same process as you go through school, and your readiness for that as you're developing the skills. Starting fairly early, are you in target to be able to meet a standard for college? And that's different than a lower standard that will still be there for graduating from high school.
Right.
So there would be a different cut, and the SAT is one of the things that you can use, and they're talking at the moment, all you need is 400 on that as an alternative. But there was a memo after that meeting that there is no plan to put the park results
On your
on the transcripts. There always has been the option for students to indicate they wanted their whatever scores sent to a college, but it would be strictly optional, but the decision seems to have been made definitely. And she was kind of trying that out, did we agree with that? And I think certainly the group there felt that it shouldn't be required that it be on the transcript. And that seemed to be where they were leaning anyhow, but then they clarified that, at least in the foreseeable future.
Right.
Well, Dr. Ogden, you started off with 47% of the state needing remedial. I really don't care about the state. I'm such a localist that I care about East Brunswick. And I know that though that number is nowhere near 47%. College admissions officers, for the most part, know the East Brunswick School District, whether it's the University of Indiana, Stanford, or Rutgers University. And they can base their admissions on the student's grade point average coming out of our school. We have a tendency on the part of a lot of our graduates to go to a lot of the same schools. And so these universities know about East Brunswick. Then, if that university needs to compare student A to student B, student A being from East Brunswick and student B being from Iowa, then they have the SAT score to go by. And then you talk about college preparation. We don't need to go down that road again, because from kindergarten through advanced placement calculus, East Brunswick prepares our students well in terms of preparation for college. And therefore, PARC as a college transcript item, PARC as a college admissions officer examining, when we started off 2 years ago with 24 states in the union giving PARC, and it's now down to, I do believe, 9. I don't feel that PARC is going to play any role whatsoever in the college admissions.
I might just,
And
since we're talking about, let me just throw in a number. We have last year, we had about 140 students in the senior class that graduated from East Brunswick that were required to take remedial courses at the college level.
So 140 out of 750?
Is it 47%? Oh, definitely not.
No.
But is it zero? No. And do we work on it constantly? And yes, they use IQ Placer, which is a national test. You know, take SATs, which are a national test.
According to NJ.com, Park cost the state of New Jersey $22 million to implement this year. For the first 2 years that I was on this Board of Education, we budgeted some $700,000 for technology. I think this past year was in and around $3.2 million, Mr. Giuliani? In and around.
Right off the top,
In and around. And the only consolation is that, as I said before from this dais, that once the park is over, then all the technology will come into play, as Dr. Valesky has already shared with us this evening. Thank you, Dr. Cohen.
But I still think it's a little premature to write off the park exam as not being useful in any way. And I think we need to give it a chance. I think our teachers are certainly giving it a chance. I think that it's our responsibility as a Board of Ed to give it a chance and to see what happens, and maybe reserve our, final decisions about it for a later date.
My comments were directed towards,
And-
as a
and-
college transcript piece.
I
And in
understand.
defense, they did hold off using those scores for evaluation till 2019, so that
Yep.
was paid. You had a comment?
yeah, about the technology. I think, certainly, this isn't about Park, but it's about the investment that the district has been making in technology, and that's been a goal of the district for years. It's been elevated with Dr. Valesky, so I think, I just want to be sure that we're understanding that the investment that we've been making in technology is to help support instruction. The benefit that it provides to Park is a secondary piece, because the primary focus has been to support instruction.
Right, and that's been the commitment of this board, and that's been very clear, so, and I think our teachers and administration embrace that.
Mr. Philipchek?
The same budget reports that were presented tonight were also presented first to the Finance Committee on February 26th. I want to thank Mr. Ruggiero and Mr. Giuliani for their reports. I'd also like to thank board members, Mr. Simmons, Mr. Cohen, Mr. Chu, for their participation. The next Finance Committee meeting is February 12th, this Thursday.
March 10th.
March.
12th, March 12th.
March 12th, March 12th, that's right, this Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Continuing
Chair.
committee reports, I attended yesterday the Cable and Telecom Advisory Committee, and the discussion was contract renewal for the cable franchise between Township of East Brunswick and Comcast. And that evening, the second reading was voted on and approved by Town Council for a related ordinance that would support that contract. The likelihood is that Comcast may not agree to it, and that it would go to the Board of Public Utilities. Ms. Moore is the student rep on the committee, and one thing we did discuss also is that with Ms. Moore's graduation, that they are seeking an incoming junior for the next school year. So we've reached out to Ms. Warren and Dr. Vanella to identify a new student rep, and certainly you can talk it up amongst your friends who might be sophomores, and encourage and identify a new student rep for the committee.
Thank you. Are there any other committee reports?